Hello everyone, my name is Helene and I'm here today to do my December wrap-up of 2015, the last one in 2015. I read quite a few books because I have been off from work. I have been on vacation and I just had a lot of time to read. The very first book I read is The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, which is a book I read because it is part of the BBC Top 100 list and I wanted to read it, so I got it from the library. In the beginning I was very confused, and not in a good way, because I felt like it was way too puzzling. Everything was very messy, and that goes for both the story but also the language, and I just wasn't into it. But I'm very happy that I continued reading after all, because it became so good and so beautiful once you got into the story. Now, to be quite honest with you, I have forgotten part of the story. I do remember it takes place in India and it's about two brothers, I believe. I was under the impression that part of the story would take place in the United States, but that was very little, so I was a little bit disappointed by that. But all in all, a very beautiful story. I have forgotten most of it, but I do remember that it was beautiful prose and a beautiful story, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. Now, the next one is also a library book, and I need my phone to remember the title, and that is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, which it's been some weeks now since I read it, so once again it's one of those books that I do remember, but it's been so long, so I have partly forgotten the story. It is about Mexico. It is about crime in Mexico, and it takes off from there. We do have a narrator who is a boy who narrates the story, and this one didn't appeal to me that much. I mean, I gave it 3 stars because it was a good story, it was entertaining, but I didn't feel like I was left with that much of an impression, as you can hear from my review. So yeah, 3 stars from me, but I have heard of people who loved this book, so give it a try if you are interested in it, I would say. And the last library book I have to talk about before I move on to the physical books is My True Love Gave to Me by Stephanie Perkins and a lot of other authors, because this is a compilation of 12 short stories that all have to do with Christmas. It is for young adults and it was very cute. I loved the first part because it definitely got me in the mood for Christmas, but in the end, towards the end, I mean when I got to, I remember Alicarda's story, I was very disappointed. Alicarda's story was very unrealistic and everything became way too sugar sweet, and I started realizing that that goes for all of the stories. So even though this was a sweet short story compilation with lots of Christmas in it and lots of love and happiness, it didn't have a lot of depth. So that is what I was missing, definitely. So in the end I gave it 3 stars, even though I really enjoyed it and it definitely got me in the mood for Christmas. The next one I read was not an entire book, because I have this chapter sampler which I was sent because this is a book which will be out in Denmark in February of 2016. It is called City on Fire by Garth Risk Hallberg, and it is already out in the United States, I believe, as well as in other countries in English. And I loved it. I mean, I can't review it yet because I haven't read the entire book. I read the first 150 pages, which I have here, but I believe the actual book will be about 800 or 900 pages, so I only have the beginning, but I loved it. This one takes place in New York City, and it deals with different families, different lives, which all entwine at some point, and I love those kinds of stories. This is exactly a book for me, because I love reading about different persons who live different lives, but who all have something in common. I'm a sucker for those kinds of stories. I mean, I don't want to rate this sample, but I'm definitely interested to read the rest of the book, and hopefully it will be as good as this sample. And also I need to mention that it's going to be about a blackout in New York City, which is another thing that really fascinates me. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned this book in my last wrap-up. Maybe I read the first part of His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman in November. I don't think so, but I'm sorry if I have already mentioned it. But Anyway, I have read the first 2.5 books of this trilogy in December. It is going very well. I love it. I just haven't been able to finish it in December. So I have read the first, there is a lot of cat fluff up here, but I have read the first 2 books, and I will say the first one was my favorite. The second one was very good as well, but not just as good. So I'm interested to see how everything wraps up. This is, if you don't know, about a girl who lives in a fantasy world. We meet her when she goes to the School of Magic, I think it is. I can't remember right now. But things start happening in the North Pole. So this story also has ice bears in it, and it has a lot of snow and winter, and it's just perfect for a wintry read. So I'm very happy that I picked it up in December. The first book I would give 5 stars, definitely. And the second book I think I would give maybe 4.5 stars. Another library book I read is Angel by Elizabeth Taylor, which I heard about through Angie's channel, Ange from Beyond the Pages. This was a lot of fun. It is about Angel, a main character whom we meet when she is about 14 years old, I think. She is a very annoying character, and I loved her for that. She is stubborn and egoistic, and she wants for everything to go her way. Also, she's a character who wants to become a writer. So in the beginning of the book, she decides to leave school in order to pursue her career of writing. So this is a book for you if you are not too worried about reading about a very annoying main character, because she definitely is. But it's also for you if you like reading about writers and books and creating stories, which I do. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. A friend of mine picked out Tess of the Durbervilles by Thomas Hardy for me because she said I had to read it in December, and I did, and I'm very happy I did. This one is about Tess, who lives in England back in 1800s, I think, with her family. However, one day her family is told that they are actually quite wealthy because they have a family that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, which is very famous and wealthy, something like that. Anyway, Tess is then sent to a new area in England in order to spread the news and gather with a new family member and maybe find a gentleman to marry. This is a very cruel story because what Tess goes through is not that pleasant. In a few words, I will say there are 2 things about this book that annoyed me. First of all, I didn't connect 100% with the protagonist, Tess. I felt like she was very lovable, I liked reading about her, but I didn't connect with her because she was also very stubborn, and I didn't understand half of the decisions that she made. Furthermore, I had some problems with the fact that this story has a very big problem in it that you don't get to know about it. I mean, you get some hints as to what it is, but you don't actually know what the big problem is. And I hate when that happens, because when I finish a book, I want a conclusion. I don't like it when a big piece of the actual story is missing. So all in all, I really like this book, but I did have a few problems with it. But because it is so beautiful, I gave it 4 stars. The next book I don't want to talk too much about because it will be out in January here in Denmark, and I will do a full video review of it, but I will mention it, and that is The Group by Mary McCarthy, which has a lovely cover and which, as I said, I will talk more about in a later video. Then we have The Watchtower by Elizabeth Harrower. This is the Danish title, but this one came out in Denmark back in September, and I ordered a review copy in exchange for an honest review. I didn't really connect with this story, which is funny because once I finished it, I gave it 4 stars, but in the end I downgraded it to 3.5 stars because it is definitely a beautiful story with a lot of symbolism in it. But it didn't leave a big impression on me. It's one of those books that you read and you really, really like, but you forget about it in a week or 2, and I have completely forgotten about it, which is not a good sign. So I can't tell you too much about it. I do remember it's something about 2 sisters who live in Australia in the 1940s, and they go through some hardships in life. things are not that easy for them. Now I remember it. Something about their mother and one of the sisters' husbands. And it's a pretty cool story. So it's another one of those books that you have to be in the mood for. But it's also very beautiful and entertaining. Now we have my least favorite book of the month. And that is unfortunately Dumpling by Julie Murphy, which was published quite recently. This is another library book and I'm happy about that because I don't want to own this. I mean, this is about a main character who is big but who decides to participate in a beauty pageant nevertheless because she has the confidence to do so. I was under the impression when I started reading that this main character would have a lot of confidence, and that's why I wanted to read it. I thought that sounded very nice and very cool. But when reading it, I didn't feel like she had that much confidence after all. She kept second guessing her actions and her body and other people around her. And another thing is that she's very cruel to other people in this story, and it's written like that's okay because she's the protagonist, so she can do whatever she wants. But I didn't feel like she sent the best message across to other young adult readers of this book. I forgot to mention, but this is young adult. So I really didn't like this story. I ended up giving it 2 stars because I do think that the actual story was entertaining. It wasn't bad. It's just the protagonist and her actions that I didn't really like. I do have one last book that I read in December, but before I get to that one, I briefly want to mention this one. I haven't read it. This is A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James, the Man Booker Prize winner of 2015. I got it from the library because I obviously wanted to read it and see what it was all about. I read the first few pages and I quickly realized that even though this might be a beautiful story, I just was not in the mood for it at this point in time. It's very heavy. I could sense that already from the first pages. It's very long, and also the language is not that easy to understand. It has this slang to it which takes me so long to read. So I decided to give up on it for now, maybe pick it up in a few years if I'm in the mood for it. I have heard so many fantastic things about this story, so I definitely want to experience it, but just not right now. However, the last book I did read in December is The Year of the Runaways by Sanjeev Sahota, which I had been recommended by quite a few people and I loved it. This was another book that takes place in India, but also in England, because it is about Indians who move from India to England in order to get some work and be able to earn some money that they can send back to their poor families at home. This one follows different characters as well, and as I said earlier, I'm a sucker for those kinds of stories. It's, as I said, a very beautiful story, but it's also cruel. It is educating because it teaches you about their lives and conditions in England, and yeah, I just really liked it, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. And that is it for my last wrap up of the year of 2015. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching and happy reading, everyone. Bye bye.